I'm big. Oh, wait, I'm supposed to show my mouth. I'm big.
Why do you have to show your mouth? I'm surly.
I don't know, just because it's creepy. And
Okay.
apparently I talk out of one side of my mouth.
Do you? Who told you this?
I don't know, either that or I had a stroke and I didn't know about it.
Hmm.
No, just look at my mouth. Half of my mouth is open when I talk.
You got a permanent sneer?
I guess so. I should be it's probably from not smiling enough. I should be Two-Face for Halloween.
There you go.
My permanent sneer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had a friend who did a really good job of that in South Korea, Bill, remember?
Yeah, Bill did do a pretty good Two-Face.
Yeah, he went all in on Halloween every year.
He did. Yeah, he did.
So
I never brought any of my crazy costumes to South
I wasn't
Korea.
really, I never really did Halloween very well.
Do you guys do Halloween in Canada?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's kind of dying out. Like my generation, the millennials kind of gave it up, but it seems to be resurging again. But yeah, we got Halloween. We are right next to the American cultural export machine that is the USA.
Yep. The Charlie Brown Halloween special.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I grew up on that shit. That and the Coca-Cola Christmas Santa. But I mean, and that sort of like
white guy Santa
wow.
when Santa was Turkish.
Coca-Cola Santa, really? Right?
I guess you say Coca-Cola and I think the polar bears.
Right, but the way we see Santa these days comes from
was 1950s, yeah.
I thought it was 20s, 1920s. Cola.
Does it go all the way back then?
I thought it was like almost 100 years now. Yeah,
could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, the white guy with the white beard and the chubby belly and
red suit and everything else. I mean, Saint Nick was cheeks. Something before that, but
yeah. Well, the Victorian English loved the concept too.
So today we're
the
going to be starting
a new season.
Maybe could have been. So today we're going to start a new season, which is going to be looking at things that can be demanded for in the event that people actually get off their ass, mobilize, and start engaging in direct action and general strikes. Because right now in Canada, we've actually got this thing going on in the capital, Ottawa, where the truckers have grouped together to drive to Ottawa in order to protest the vaccine mandate. And honestly, it kind of makes sense. Like, I actually agree with them. On the other hand, the conservatives, for whatever reason, have embraced this idea, and the liberals, because we have a very pro-vaccine, fuck everything else approach to COVID-19. We've seen the media and the government turn on this protest group. And there's been a lot of demonizing, and some of the characters associated with it are unfortunately going to be our far right agitators. But I mean, this is the thing, is Occupy failed because the left didn't know what changes had to happen. And in the decade plus that's followed, the far right has grown in strength because people have become increasingly disillusioned with the solutions that are presented. Really, like, there is no coherency. Like, what can be offered to strip away the support of the far right, I think, is the thing that every person, every progressive should be asking themselves, right?
Well, part of it is they're just going to die off.
Who's that?
At least in the US, the last two elections, Trump support accounts for, like, just to make the math easy, let's say 45% of the population. And that's too high. It's probably say 40% of the population
supports Trump.
Yes, and you would think some of them are rational and lying to themselves, but a good portion of that group is people who just don't think logically. They're reacting instead of processing information. They're reacting to information instead of actually taking it in and processing it. And this sounds horribly biased because I'm basically calling them stupid, but I'm not saying that they're stupid. I'm saying that they're overwhelmed. They're too busy living their lives, and the snippets of information that they do get, along with the Dunning-Kruger effect, make them think they know more than they actually do. And those people, because I would only say maybe 20% of America is legitimately racist. Hopefully. So that means about half of Trump's support supports him because he thinks they're going to take out the deep state, or like they're able to employ cognitive dissonance to ignore the fact that Trump's an overt white nationalist.
Well, I mean, tribalism has been bred into the people of North America.
And that's another part
tribalism.
of it. Yeah.
So, I mean, this left-right divide is a big issue because, I mean, the way that, for lack of a better word, the elites, such as the media and the political class, frame dialogues is from a corporate neoliberal viewpoint. So when you have a divergence from that, like most people are not who the media seems to think they are. There's an incredible amount of social engineering being attempted, like with, for example, CTV and CBC use industry heads rather than talking broadly to people who they might disagree with. Or you can see it in the attack on Joe Rogan, where the liberal press is probably one of the liberal, I would say it's actually accurate. The liberal press, such as CNN, MSBN,
MSNBC,
CBC, and up here, is pushing a censorship viewpoint, despite the Royal Science Academy, I think it is, something in Great Britain, releasing studies saying that censorship is the worst way to deal with misinformation, which is quite true from what I can tell of my own research.
Well, so, I mean, with Rogan, it's more complicated because it's not the government attempting to censor Rogan.
The government has discussions with media about how they present information.
I think media's motivation is mostly economic, not some nefarious Kabbalistic.
There's media
political intent.
The media's political intent is on full display in Canada. On election days, they'd actually have like front page vote conservative on newspapers and shit like that.
Yeah, editorial boards for newspapers have the right to do that.
Yeah, you don't think that it looks that ends up those views influence the people that they hire and the news that they look at. I mean, that stuff has ended up.
I think a lot of times editorial boards are conservative and actual journalists tend to be more liberal or progressive.
I don't agree. I don't think the journalists speak. This thing about it is the journalists become what's required to excel in their environment, or they don't succeed.
Well, they don't become editors.
they don't get they don't get good assignments. They don't get the concept that these people are different from their editorial board doesn't work that way. The culture of the society will dictate the behavior of the individuals. That's how human behavior operates. Individualism is actually very weak in
That's
humans.
far too simplistic,
Not
because
true. I'm
you
explaining it in a
have
simplistic fashion.
completely you subsume the beliefs of your employers.
People people adapt to the group consensus around them. Very much so. This has been observed time and time and time again in human groups. Like group dynamics, the group is stronger than the individual in dictating ethics. That is why the people, when they join jobs, can act in psychopathic manners that they would not think themselves capable of if they actually thought about it in the first place.
That's entirely true.
Of
Yes.
course it is.
However, my point is that
your belief or point?
Both, because that would, isn't that the same thing?
All right.
That you are overly simplifying the role of journalism and journalists in relation to their editors.
I'm simplifying
It's
them
often
into the
much
term of
more
what gets
adversarial, to
printed.
my understanding. Well, the editors ultimately control what gets printed. That's the thing. That's why journalists don't necessarily like editors, is because the editors get to slash and burn what they thought was a great sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It's why, it's like saying teachers are the same thing as principals. They're all part of the educational system, and therefore they're all going to bend their knee to
there will be
same
a
ideal.
cultural group dynamic that actually serves to equalize behavior amongst them. It's
Most
actually
teachers I
strong.
know are rapidly becoming more radical, and in the face of their compatriots being the opposite.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing vast changes in group dynamics at the moment, but it is a observed effect. Like the people adapt to the group doesn't adapt to the people as a rule, unless there's severe disruption going on, which is we are currently seeing.
Yeah.
We are genetically, yeah, I know. The idea of individualism is so strongly ingrained into both of our cultures that it really is difficult for our people to understand the science is completely against individualism.
Yes, but
has
the science been tested? Has the science been repeated? Has the science had cultural?
Been a bunch. The idea, the work on group dynamics has been done for decades. It's actually fairly clear. Like people adapt to groups, not vice versa.
Maybe I'm just an outlier.
There are definitely contrarians in society, but they represent a very small group of like the overall, like most things can be understood on bell curves when it comes to behavior.
Sure, that's why I say I'm probably an outlier.
Well, I mean, everybody
I don't
is
really
an outlier
adjust
on
my
something.
behavior to the group. I adjust my behavior to information. If the group provides information, I'll adjust my behavior, but I'm not going to do it just to accommodate someone's.
But that is very typical for American groups. You have integrated American culture so strongly that you're an American. Like that's very American. Like you're this, like the way I had Americans come up from these estates when I was working retail, and yeah, no, the level of arrogance was actually really high. I mean, the whole American tourist thing was on full display. That surety of belief and that strength of individualism is like propagated through every inch of your television and everything else. Like most people are so utterly
Brainwashed.
bombarded by it that
Yeah.
that well, culture is a form of brainwashing. You were surrounded by it and pressured through it through your formative years, such that these base understandings inform all decisions going forward. But I mean,
That's why whenever I meet a new person that's American, I always ask them, not where are you from, but where did you go to high school? Because that experience in itself is going to color a lot of like long-term behavioral tendencies.
yeah, environment dictates behavior hugely, and culture is a form of environment. So I mean, this is kind of the thing, is like our environment is such that it is now breeding fascism. So I mean, this is why we have to talk about what people, if they want to move forward without hate groups leading the way, what are the things that needed to be asked for?
Without violent revolution.
Well,
we want to avoid violent revolution if possible.
I would just
Mass
rather avoid
mobilization would get it
fascism.
done.
Yeah, of course it would. General strikes for the win. Very easy, but when
But
you
to
have the
bring
general
it back
strikes, what
to
do you
those
want?
truck drivers, I thought the truck drivers were upset about the requirement for them to be immunized to go into the US.
And vice versa. Yeah, they
Okay,
don't want a mandate. I actually
but isn't it the US that's dictating that mandate, not the Canadian
both
government?
sides, from my understanding. I don't know.
Well, Andrew Yang has been predicting this, that the truckers have the power to effectively shut down everything. Yes.
No, see, this is, but it's the mandate actually, like the mandate doesn't make sense from a scientific view. Like the only people who are protected by forced inoculations are the people receiving the vaccine. This is not protecting vulnerable populations at this point. If we actually gave a shit about vulnerable populations, we would not have allowed COVID to become endemic. We would have actually dealt with it properly, but the government doesn't give a shit about that. They just didn't want the hospitals collapsing. At least up here.
Yeah, no, same here. Our hospitals are collapsing. Wisconsin is an at-will state, which in the US means there are no employment contracts. Or if they exist, they're not binding. They're like mediative documents between people and the entity that they work for. So in an at-will state, you can leave.
Labor movements.
Crush labor movements. Yep, absolutely. But the benefit of an at-will state is you as an employee can leave with no notice and have no legal repercussions for doing so.
Oh, are you talking about the radiology department story?
Yes. And so in Wisconsin, one group of employees at one hospital wanted to move, and they were, oddly enough, moving mostly en masse to another hospital.
I actually heard the story behind this. I know how it works. This worked out.
And a judge actually barred them from doing so in an at-will state.
Yeah.
Which is literal proof that the rule of law does not exist.
They're indentured servants.
Yes, they are. It turns them functionally into indentured servants.
One person, I guess, applied for and got the job, and it was like a really good pay raise. So he like bragged about it, or she bragged about it, or it bragged about it. I don't fucking know the gender about it at work. And everyone else was like, damn, that does sound good. So they all fucking applied. So this company goes to the judge to get an injunction to stop them from leaving until such a time as they are able to get replacements. And yeah, there was no contract. They now have to work at both places. And literally they can't leave. They are not allowed to leave. Like this is guy, I can't even understand how a judge did that. Like corporate America owns fucking the judges, like the legal system down there, like it corporate Canada owns the courts up here. Like our laws are written to favor corporations. There's
Yeah,
been
well,
analysis of the law up here.
the whole argument that conservatives or people on the economic right, which is probably more fair, is that being an at-will state is advantageous to the employee and the employer because you have no government regulation demanding how you are treated. But that's clearly not true. If the employer wants to force you to stay, apparently that can happen.
Yeah. No, it's America and Canada have
So we
basically
have
become
no
modern
rights,
feudal
but we do have
societies.
responsibilities.
Yeah.
I'm kind of tempted to send the IRS a letter that says I will not be paying taxes this year because I do not feel my government represents me, and there shall be no taxation without representation. And just see.
They'll
I'll
take you to
probably
court.
be audited.
Yeah.
I might go to prison. I it's also
A
possible
tax strike would
they're
be
so
fascinating.
overwhelmed that uh they just would be like, oh, we're gonna get like $300 out of this guy. It's not worth the effort.
So I mean, and that might, and right there, you've just expressed one thing that people could be demanding, which is actual representation. We have both of us, our governments work for their favorite billionaires and the fucking like the job afterwards, or at least it looks like it. So I mean, there's the first thing is like,
Or they use their position to become billionaires, or at the very least millionaires, because
oh, I was
Pelosi's
looking
a
at
millionaire.
Pelosi's not even the worst. I was looking at that list from Unusual Whales and the representatives from US Congress, and I wish we had something like that on the go up here because like Harper made millions of dollars as a politician, from what I can tell. And like Trudeau's father obviously made bank because Trudeau is a trust fund kid. Like politics should not be a way to build generational wealth. So I mean, representation, an actual representation that is strong, like is a thing that people I think need to demand. We don't have it. These are fake democracies, in my opinion.
So in the US, the way to get actual representation would be we'd need to repeal Citizens United.
Okay, so
The
that
court
gets down to
case that
litigation.
says, sure, but it's the
So
court case that says money is speech.
But you know, this is the thing is back in the 1800s, everybody thought that if they got the vote, then we'd be able to fix this gross income inequality that is actually a historical norm if you look at history. There's usually a very small upper class and the rest of the people are poor, and a very tiny middle class. That is the norm of like history, I'd say, for most of it. It's only since the Industrial Revolution and then World War I and World War II, where World War II specifically, where almost all the capital globally got smashed, where we could see equality and the potential for equality emerge. So, I mean,
well, that's one of the things. That's why we have the growth of the middle class.
hmm.
And part of that is the economic principle of speed of money. That if a middle class person goes and buys breakfast at a diner and pays $10 for his meal, then the owner of the diner turns around and uses that $10 to buy meat, and the meat supplier uses that $10 to pay the wages of his truck drivers who deliver the meat.
Yeah, yeah.
And that
It's in
truck driver
constant motion.
uses it, yes. Whereas when the wealthy have money, they hoard it.
Yeah.
And it just sits there gaining interest, or
The term is called dead money.
it goes into the investment economy, which is uncoupled from reality, and therefore doesn't have the ability to directly affect the economy in the way that actual money being used on goods and services can.
Yeah, well, you think of it, there's two
One of the
economies
reasons
on
a
the
VAT
go.
tax is not a terrible idea.
This is kind of the thing, is flat taxation doesn't really
VAT,
work.
VAT.
Value added tax.
Yeah.
That's a flat tax that everyone would pay.
Well, it depends on how you define it. You could
Ones
say
I've
it's on
seen.
certain sectors of the economy.
Yeah.
Because
See,
like in Korea, VAT tax was only, like you went to a Korean restaurant, you didn't pay a VAT tax. You went to a restaurant that served food that wasn't Korean food, there was a VAT tax.
So yeah, representation is one. I mean, economically, you've just brought up a really interesting issue. I mean, the economic system that we've been sold, capitalism, literally just tells us, the word capitalism literally just tells us who the economy is designed for and who is
People
going
with
to
capital.
be the beneficiary of the economic output of the economy.
People
So I mean,
with capital.
this is the problem with the stock market and the investor economy, which is a rentier economy on the productive economy. It's that people with money are leveraging money to take more money from people who are working hard to make lives.
So
I
you
mean,
could
in a
call
lot of
that
ways,
parasitism.
it is a form of parasitism. It absolutely is. So, I mean, something to, I think that should be demanded is an end to the stock markets.
Well, we need some sort of functional investment economy for the purposes of raising capital, because there has to be some attempted objectivity to distribute capital. And that's what we sort of have. What we don't, throwing it out is not the solution. Cleaning it up is.
You can't clean it up. Capitalism is designed to create monopolies. So, I mean, you would have to have a hard regulatory system in place, and you would have to have incredible taxation on the people making above certain amounts of money, like 90% over 10 million on everything over 10 million. And wealth taxation are ideas that we need to be using to get the money that is currently doing nothing into pockets where it can be doing something.
And what Josh is talking about in US terms is the marginal tax rate. So we need to return to a marginal tax rate like we had in the 1940s and 50s, where highest tax rate was 92%. On today, what would be the equivalent of over $10 million?
Take everything.
And a wealth tax would functionally draw down concentrated wealth slowly over time. Like it's been suggested a 2 or 3% wealth tax. I think we just do a 10% wealth tax and get it done.
I think everything over $1 billion is taxed at 100%. This is it. Like
the government takes it all.
Yeah, and redistribute.
I'm fine with 92.
It's like, let me put it this way: the people who become billionaires, like the Davros billionaires, the people who want to fucking, what's the word for it? Engineer a future where they get to stay fabulously rich and nothing changes for them, need to become fucking beggars. is what needs to happen. People like that are basically building machines. Like, this ethical.
Then you're talking about violent revolution and eating the rich.
No, I'm talking about destroying, like taking apart their empires and redistributing the wealth, and so that innovation restarts. The way that these concentrations of wealth stifle innovation and growth.
Sure.
Like, these people are best viewed, unfortunately, as parasites. These, like, the ethical dilemma. Here's a button. If you push it, I'll give you $1 million, but someone's going to die, but you don't know who. They built machines to press that buttons for them as fast as it can. You don't make $1 billion, period, through anything productive. You make build, like here in Canada, the Waltons are, like, a report has come out on the Waltons showing that basically their billion comes from exploiting really the people who work for them, to the point where these people can't afford to live despite working 40 hours a day. These people, there's something wrong.
Are you
in
talking
their
about
heads.
Walmart, the Waltons?
Well, I don't know. There's whoever owns
Because in
Dominion
the
up here.
US, the Walmarts are owned by the Waltons.
It's a similar name up here.
And
second.
they do the same thing here.
Yeah,
Walmart has
Yeah, those people
basically
are
by
criminals.
paying low wages, they have employees that are using government subsidies in order
Yeah.
to survive,
Like
which means the
legitimate
Waltons and Walmart by
parasites.
extension are using tax dollars to supplement their income by not paying their employees a living wage. The poverty wage rate needs to go up. The poverty rate, the average American makes $45,000. That's probably where the line for the poverty rate should be.
What's that?
45,000. So I said 45 million. $45,000 a year should be the poverty rate.
And that's the thing, is like the whole argument that what's the word for it? The whole argument that you can't increase wages because of inflation. Like, inflation never stopped. Wages going up until the point where it now takes 2.5 people to make what one person did in the 70s did happen. So, I mean,
that's what happened in the 70s. What you're talking about is the decoupling of productivity and wages.
So another thing,
productivity went up,
wages.
But wages did not.
Yeah.
Also, work hours were predicted to go down, but work hours haven't decreased.
Because of the advent of useless jobs, and people can't work less because people are now working 2 or 3 jobs just to survive.
And let's add to the list universal health care, at least for the US.
Yeah, you guys are definitely
as something we should be demanding, because the fact that your employer controls your health care means you have to kowtow to your employer or you avoid losing your health care.
Yeah, there is some issues up here, but yeah, it's we don't have that issue, luckily. I'm only alive because of healthcare, free healthcare.
And I'll be dead soon because I'm a fat smoker.
Yeah,
what are you doing? This is great podcasting, you staring at a screen.
I'm looking up the owner of Dominion currently.
Gallon of water a day. It's good for you. Gallon jug's an easy way to measure.
That's something that's something I need to do.
I think another thing in the US specifically we need to call for is subsidized public transportation.
Basically, I would put that under the broad label of subsidizing fucking infrastructure.
Sure.
Like, infrastructure is
first thing, the first, I guess, would probably, we need to tax the rich enough we can rebuild our bridges.
That would help.
I live in Iowa, and something like, God, it's pushing 90% of our bridges have like questionable aspects to them.
Yeah.
Because there's so many little bridges over country roads that just don't get kept up.
Yeah, that would be a pretty serious issue. Up here, we do have an infrastructure deficit, but I mean, you guys definitely have us beat. I mean, I think you guys got something like, what is it, close to a $2-3 trillion infrastructure deficit, where like you guys are approaching like third world conditions on your infrastructure, like not fit for fucking like people to travel on sort of issues.
Well, and this is another thing we should push for is regionalism. And by that, I mean, we need to decouple the power grid from a national power grid to a more regionalized power grid. And it needs to be focused around renewable energy.
Okay. So I guess that's kind of a decent idea. See,
I mean, ideally, each city should be able, if cut off from the grid, to continue to function.
Yeah,
that's not a big ask.
It's gonna get pretty fucking crazy in the next few years.
You subsidize the installation of the new end batteries that are coming out in homes, and you subsidize the installation of wind and solar. Most people's houses can have solar panels on their roofs.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be like see-through solar panel and stuff like that. So, I mean, these are, you don't really ask. I can't find the article on who I was trying to look up. Unfortunately, it's buried fucking somewhere in the internet. I mean, like, you look at healthcare, the idea of actually like paying for infrastructure is huge. Healthcare for you guys is huge. Up here in Canada, we're discussing pharmacare and dental care being added to universal coverage, which really is necessary. And the thing is like when people ask, how do you pay for this? When like the military industrial complex steals so much money from both of our countries every single year.
Just Google the US national budget and pie chart.
Yeah.
And you will get a lovely graphical display of what percentage of our economy in the form of taxation is spent primarily on defense.
So, I mean, how to pay
Social Security.
Yeah, like how to pay for this is not the question. We have incredible amounts of dead money lying around that rich people have squirreled away by literally buying out governments. Well, quite obviously at this point. We have the military and industrial complex defunding that. We need to defund the military industrial complex. We need a safe world, or we're not going to get through the environmental fucking crisis, because war is going to push us straight over the edge, and the amount of pollution caused by the military industrial complex globally is probably the highest chunk that needs to go of all of it. It is the biggest polluter.
I thought that was agriculture.
Or no, methane is food for people individually. Quitting meat is the best thing, is the biggest thing a person could do. It actually, I guess, reduces by 3/4 the amount of harmful stuff caused by your food intake. But that's 3/4 of your food intake. But from my understanding, like the military industrial complex as a like global sector is the worst polluter out there. like pretty much full stop, especially once you take into account what it does to entire like geographical areas, like it did to Syria, like it's done to the Gaza Strips, like they're doing to Yemen, like is currently occurring in Ethiopia. So I mean, the after effects of military conflict, like our governments don't take care of our people. They take care of their interests, and they always have. Like governments work for the 1%. That's we briefly thought otherwise, but I mean, the events of the last 10, 20, 30 years have demonstrated otherwise. Democracy is not surviving a return to capital levels similar to pre-World War II.
So we've got taxation down on the list, right?
Not just taxation. We need to stop the concentration of private capital at certain levels. Like I'm not talking money, I'm talking capital. Capital is what, like if you read the books back in the 1800s, like fucking Jane Eyre, those fucking things where like country lords could go to country lords and they'd be able to, and they'd know they'd have like, they'd be living on a stipulant from their properties, right? Well, that's how rich people have generational wealth, is the capital that they own has returns that are, as growth slows down economically, will be worth more and more and more and more. And as things have been slowing down economically, they've been purchasing up more and more capital, right? So those things long term will keep in a small portion of people incredibly rich. Whereas, so if you actually want to like have real equality, you have to make it so that the distribution of private capital is more equally situated through most people's hands rather than stuck in the hands of few. And I mean, a lot of capital these days is in the forms of shares. And I mean, one thing that could happen is the socialization of shares, such that people all have their own shares within given companies that they work at and whatnot, right? But a redistribution of private capital is something that I think is incredibly important, especially considering how the distribution of capital has occurred historically and again has been occurring over the last 50 years as basically the rich robbing the poor blind, with the visible result of the middle class literally being destroyed.
Another one would be the need for intelligent, sustained, within our abilities, scientifically driven solutions to climate change.
We actually need to cut down consumption. We have like this, yeah. I mean, our countries, the top 10% of people globally are basically the people driving climate change. It's not the mass of people. So, I mean, people like me and you and our friends are the people who need to actually reduce our impact. Most of the world is actually okay, like when it comes to how much they're contributing towards the problems. The 1%, the how much the 1% account for in terms of pollution is staggering. So I mean, if we want to fix the world going forward, a lot of it is going to come down to the people of North America and Europe and Australia, and to a lesser degree, Asia, parts of Asia now, literally need to suck it up and bring down our lifestyles to a manageable level that isn't burning through the Earth's renewable resources and destroying the habitats. I
Well,
mean,
another
that's the
solution
hard part
is
about it, is that that's
a
it. There is
big
no,
chunk of that is energy creation, though, and we can replace that energy creation with energy creation as a result of renewables.
there is, there is a fair amount due to energy. I mean, the renewables are questionable. I mean, if you look at the resource extraction parts of our societies, they commit crimes against humanity globally and destroy entire ecosystems to get the metals required to drive the green revolution, right?
Yeah,
So, I
nothing's
mean,
going to be perfect, though, man. It's
it's,
like expecting what we're talking about is
hmm,
what we in our countries
hmm,
need to demand should a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
mobilization happen.
I got
And
distracted,
worrying
but
about some fucking
yeah, yeah.
theoretical people in Afghanistan is not going to sway people's hearts and minds. They just
Oh,
don't give a shit.
well, this is kind of the thing. I mean, you can demand all of this stuff that you want, but I did get off track, but the sort of reforms we need environmentally are going to hurt everybody. And that's the thing, is like we are going into a period where people are going to have to suck it up, where people have been sucking it up for decades and are on the verge of fucking flipping the table. It's quite an interesting fucking catch 22, but I digress. Yeah, things that can be asked for, better, like reform representation, reform taxation, reform wages, reform healthcare, fix infrastructure, redistribute excessive private capital. Things that allow people like fucking Bezos, the Virgin Mobile guy, and Musk, yeah,
Musk.
Musk, engaging in a dick measuring contests into space. Like we can't, the world can't support people like that anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and they're not contributing in any significantly meaningful way. It would be, I would much rather see governments doing that work so that the progress that's derived from that isn't considered corporate capital and
Yeah.
hidden away from the rest of the world. If the governments do it, then they're responsible for distributing any technological advances that they make to the rest of the world. That's one of the reasons we've seen a slowdown in advancements, is that it's gone, government investment in things like DARPA and NASA have greatly decreased,
Yep.
and most of it's being driven by venture capital, which means everybody wants to hold on and keep secret any breakthrough they make rather than throwing it out to the world.
Hmm.
And the one thing we need to remember is, just like Josh was saying earlier, most humans fit on a bell curve in some version. You geniuses are out there, but you have to feed them information to get massive breakthroughs.
Hmm.
And if people are cloistering their data, then
Yeah.
that knowledge is not getting distributed and the advances are going to peter out.
And I mean, corporate innovation is quite low. Corporations, I mean, another thing to get rid of is corporations working on behalf of shareholder profits.
Only working on behalf of shareholder profits. I mean, to
No,
some extent, they would have to work for shareholder profits in some way, or else the investment economy doesn't work. So scrap the investment economy.
the investment economy is a parasitic economy on the productive economy. So I would
It wasn't
prefer,
always.
it's been, yes, it has been.
Not for people who are starting new businesses that need a significant amount of capital.
It's still a parasitic economy. Despite allowing new things to enter the market, its overall effect destroys the productive market over time, which is why we continue for over 2 centuries now to see regular cycles of boom or bust behavior within the markets, like depressions, followed by good periods, followed by like serious depressions on an almost every 10-year cycle starting around 1800. So, I mean, it actually tends towards a monopoly. I mean, it's a mechanical, mechanistic view of what market economics should be, when it really is a more organic, ecological means by which healthy economies seem to work, with not too many big things in the environment, because an environment can only support so many like alpha predators.
Sure, just like the globe, the planet can't sustain countries being superpowers anymore. We
Yeah,
can't sustain corporate entities that
no.
are massive transnational conglomerates
So I got
that
down end
flout
corporate
laws and do
socialism.
whatever they want. Sure,
Yeah.
that would be a good one.
But I'd also like to add end corporate personhood,
Yes.
because corporate personhood is not just abused, but has resulted in immortal superhumans with extra rights because of how the laws are written. So, I mean, corporate personhood is one of the ways that a lot of our,
CEOs get away without actually going to jail when their corporations do something inappropriate.
well, I mean, in theory, the corporate veil is not meant to protect illegal activity, but it is. Corporations have been abused to create tax havens, hide money, like literally keep generational wealth hidden away from taxation so that rich people could continue to get richer and richer. Excuse me. I mean, it really does come down to, we can either afford a few billionaires controlling everything and everybody else suffering and barely making it while the world dies around us, or we can even things out and create an economy that actually works. Because I mean, this is the thing, the economy is not a natural phenomena. We're not dealing with something that has immutable natural rules that we can't bypass. We invented the fucking thing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it exists in our minds. And
Only
the
in our
only thing,
minds.
and even physical limitations that we assumed were normative can be often overcome. Like, look at the 4-minute mile. Somebody ran a 4-minute mile for the first time, and within a year, a bunch more people ran a 4-minute mile. It wasn't that those people couldn't have also been the first to run a 4-minute mile. It's that they didn't push themselves and didn't think that they could, so they didn't try.
Hmm. And sports equipment and technology, plus training regimes and
Sure.
health have all increased. So, I
Yes.
mean, it is multifactorial, but something is always impossible until somebody does it. Ursula Le Guin, I think her name is, said that like the monarchies before, capitalism will seem, and I'm paraphrasing, insurmountable until it isn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've
And
got
I
to,
don't even think we're not going to eliminate capital. We're not going to eliminate the need for some method of exchange. What I think we're going to end up with is some combination of immediate needs being met through social means and money continuing to exist for a while, as long as, and then it primarily gets used for luxuries.
yeah, and I mean, that's definitely sounds like the whole Davros, you will own nothing and be happy sort of idea. But I mean, the idea that we need a means to continue barter in a world where, frankly, all our basic needs can now be met with relative ease. What economic system develops really could either enslave or set humans free.
Sure. And we don't know what the next thing is. We don't know whether it's evolutionary economics, it's environmental economics, it's,
I mean,
I mean,
optimal
people are
distribution will
working on
probably be
it.
eventually put under AI control.
And then we have to be able to trust AI to do that, not have questionable algorithms underlying their logic so that it creates problems.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the whole idea. And I mean, another thing that I think would need to be asked for is we need vast judicial system reform.
The
In
rule of
Canada,
law needs to actually be a rule of law.
we not just need a rule of law. Currently, we in Canada, and I suspect it's very similar in the United States, have a pay-to-win legal system that is more akin to what feels like a slot machine than an ability to seek and find a just solution to the problems that crop up in society. I mean, as I keep saying, lawyers are overpaid art students prone to over formalistic thinking with a monopoly on law that they have ruthlessly exploited for profit to the detriment of justice. So, I mean, in Canada, we actually have whew, there's no foundation for de jure power in Canada exercised by the Canadian government. The first myth of Canada's judicial system is that they have a right to have a judicial system. It's kind of crazy. There is actually a case, Supreme Court of Canada case law from, I think it's like 1996 or something, involving an Aboriginal group. I think it's Delgama. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But it and others have basically called out the Canadian government for being a de facto force without de jure power, because without a treaty to the crown, Canada has no right over any land, and most of Canada isn't covered by treaty. So, I mean, like, judicial reform really needs to start. And then we also have a problem with the legal system being written to enable corporations to succeed over people time and time and time again. If you look at the use of injunctions, they're almost always granted on behalf of corporations against people, despite the fact that they're not supposed to be granted where money could work as a recompense.
Yeah, an actual rule of law would be a good thing.
Yeah, well, hold the people accountable for doing the same things that you'd go to jail for. Wouldn't that be nice?
Shocking, shocking, right? All right, well, we got a heck of a start on a list here, and we're going to dive deeper into these as the season goes on. But if you want to comment on something you think that if we get off our asses and mass mobilize and they come to us and say, okay, what do you want? Same thing they did to the 99 percenters.
Yeah, and that's where
And the
Occupy fell
99
apart.
percenters said,
Yeah,
let's have a list in our back pocket this time.
yeah.
So what do you want on that list? Tell us in the comments.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting, Jeffs.
Go Jeffs. All right, I've been Big.
I've been Surly. Have a good one, boys. Like, click, share, whatever the fuck it is you're supposed to do on these fucking platforms.
If you're gonna lick your screen, disinfect it first and after.
Probably both is a good idea.
I think it's quite egotistical of you to think somebody's going to want to lick you.
Man, there's some fucked up fetishes out there. I'm kind of
Screen licking.
scared if I'm not comfortable with being included in someone's fetishes, frankly.
Screen licking.
Ugh.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.